Sitting in the car, Garen glanced at the driver and Jaden sitting in front. Both were silent. It didn't seem like they intended to speak. He turned to look out the car window. The buildings in Gila City were similar to those in Waishan City, but taller. Some were even tens of meters tall, straight and box-like, like huge pieces of stacking blocks. The shadows they cast were massive and black. The motorcade seemed to drive from under the shadow of a building immediately into another. Garen could vaguely make out that there were external lifts on the sides of some of the tall buildings. They were those old-fashioned ones made of wood and metal with an extremely slow speed. Pedestrians on the streets were fashionably dressed. Some girls and rich ladies even wore slightly revealing clothing, displaying their slim figures. The motorcade kept going forward. Time passed. The buildings on both sides became less dense and older. The scene outside gradually resembled Waishan City, and the pedestrians seemed to dress more modestly as well. This was the first time Garen left Waishan. Previously, he had thought it was one of the more modern places of this era. He didn't expect Gila City to be so much more developed than it. The car slowed as it drove into this area. Soon it turned a corner into an underground car park within a housing area. The car gradually slowed to a halt, and the engine was cut off. "We're here. Please step out," Jaden said in a low voice. Garen nodded, pulled the handle and stepped out. He scanned the whole underground car park. It was filled with silver-striped cars. There were a few still driving in, yet to park, and some with car doors open and the passengers standing around the cars taking in their surroundings. The sound of car doors closing echoed around the car park. His master Fei Beiyun stepped out accompanied by 2 Celestial Circle Gate disciples. Garen quickly walked over to follow behind his master. "This way please." Jaden bowed respectfully, then walked toward the elevators in a far corner of the car park. A few Celestial Circle Gate disciples trailed behind, leading Garen and his master. What a grand display by the Celestial Circle Gate. They escorted us with police cars and sent so many disciples to receive the practitioners of secret martial art from all sects, Garen said. This is normal. The gate master of the Celestial Circle Gate has several disciples who serve as senior officials in this province and a few other neighboring ones. He has a lot of soft power, Fei Beiyun explained softly. You'll be directed to the student area later. Take care, don't get into trouble. Yes, master. Garen nodded. They followed Jaden into the elevator. The inner walls of the elevator were made of mahogany. It was spacious inside. The floor was covered with a square black rug with the Celestial Circle Gate printed in calligraphy on it. The few of them were silent inside the elevator. The movement of the elevator could barely be felt. Ding. The elevator announced its stop, and the doors slowly opened. Beyond the doors was a black corridor with stone floor and walls. Every few steps along the corridor, a disciple in a sharp black suit stood in attention, lending a sense of formality to the atmosphere. The corridor was linked to others at both ends. From time to time, there would be people in all manner of dress passing through the corridor, escorted by the Celestial Circle Gate disciples. All of them went toward the left. Jaden led Fei Beiyun and Garen into the corridor, then turned left into a wider one. Garen walked along the passage. He could feel the cold hard stone surface beneath his feet. There was a faint scent of incense in the air. He had a vague sense of excitement. It was his first time being at a grand event like this. Putting aside all else, just by looking at the 2 rows of disciples in black suits standing in attention, sharp and alert, with fingertips like sharp spikes, emitting a faint white glow, one could tell that they were not mediocre. His master in front started greeting peers upon turning the corner. It seemed like he had met some close acquaintances. Fei Beiyun put his arm over the shoulder of a short and stout man and walked with him. They greeted each other affectionately. Garen lowered his head and looked solemn. He walked into a small hall with a circular fountain. Senior brother, please follow me, a Celestial Circle female disciple walked over to Garen and politely said. She led him away from Fei Beiyun and the rest, toward a corridor on the right. Several disciples from other sects, like Garen, were led toward the same direction. They followed the female disciple to the end of the corridor and entered a spacious square black hall which was filled with large mahogany round tables and chairs. A lot of people were already seated inside. By a wall in the hall, a few clowns in colorful clothing were performing an act, attracting bursts of laughter from the crowd. No one noticed as Garen walked in. The female disciple handed him a sign with the White Cloud Gate written on it and left. He found an inconspicuous corner to sit down and stuck the sign into the placeholder on the table. Full-length windows spanned one side of the hall. Even though Garen sat in an inconspicuous corner, but it was right by the full-length windows. He could look out down below. He turned his gaze there. He saw the middle floor of the gray building opposite. There were 3 more floors below that. That meant that he was on the 4th floor. He could vaguely make out the celestial circle gate disciples escorting people and constantly walking around in the building opposite. They entered another large hall. What a grand event! Garen couldn't even begin to speculate how many similar large halls there were, but it was clear that this wasn't the only one. Not long after he sat down, a muffled commotion seemed to come from the corridor's entrance. Bio is here. It's Bio. Such a big reputation. I'd like to see how great this so-called, one of the 2 stars of the south, is. A bald man sitting at a round table toward the front right of Garen sneered. One of the 2 stars of the south. Garen looked up toward the entrance. After a few seconds, a blue-haired youth wearing casual dark blue clothes walked in. He looked indifferent. His eyes, brows and hair were all blue, even his skin had a blue tinge to it, which gave him an ice-cold impression. The youth scanned the hall and walked straight toward the frontmost table on the right. A group of people in white automatically stood up and gave him their place. They moved to an empty table at the back and sat down. "Thank you," Bio calmly said, then sat down. "I can't believe," a middle-aged man said woefully. He was sitting with a woman of similar age to Garen's right. Garen looked at the sign on their table. It read, "Orthogon Sword." The man whose side had black hair, black eyes, white skin and a tall nose. He seemed to be of a mixed race. Garen hesitated slightly, then poked his head over and asked, "Sir, who is this Bio? Why is he blue from top to toe? And they call him, one of the 2 stars of the south. Do you mind enlightening me?" The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment, then a smile broke across his face. He glanced at Garen's sign on the table. "I see you're from the White Cloud Gate. Our Orthogon Sword Gate is right by your dojo. We've heard of your sect. I'm Radon. It's an honor." Garen was stunned. He saw a room full of foreign people with all types of hair and skin colors speaking in a Chinese martial art world tone. Even though they were speaking different languages, it still felt bizarre. "I'm Garen, Brother Radon. Can you tell me more about the secret martial art scene in the south?" Of course. The man looked like a talkative person. He came over and started explaining in detail about the whole secret martial art situation in the south. "Looks like you're a new disciple. I'll explain it to you in detail. The strongest sects in the secret martial art world in the south are the Celestial Circle Gate and Crimson Sand Sword. I don't have to say much about the Celestial Circle Gate. They train in the Celestial Circle Fist. Their fingers are extremely powerful. You will see it in the next few days. Crimson Sand Sword is another large sect. They occupy 2 provinces in the south, but are slightly weaker than the Celestial Circle Gate. This Bio is currently the most outstanding disciple in Crimson Sand Sword, comparable to Andrella of the Celestial Circle Gate. It is rumored that he has trained in the secret martial art of his sect to a terrifying stage. His true strength has almost surpassed their masters and elders." "Surpassed masters and elders? Is it possible? This Bio doesn't look a day older than 25. His true strength is that powerful." Garen was slightly surprised. "You should know, in the secret martial art world, strong youths have the physical advantage. Experts who are a generation older can only rely on their rich experience. In order to achieve a higher level, if they don't do it in their youth, by 25 or so, they wouldn't have a chance after that. But before then, it all comes down to talent and effort. Andrella of the Celestial Circle Gate and Bio of Crimson Sand Sword are the type of geniuses who are not lacking in both. Coupled with the best secret martial arts, it wouldn't be difficult for them to become powerful," Radon lamented. There was a hint of envy in his eyes. "The body weakens with age. No matter how you maintain it, your true strength would start declining. Such is the law of nature. There is no way of resisting. You have worked hard enough," the middle-aged woman comforted Radon, gently holding his hand. Garen seemed to be deep in thought. "So Andrella and Bio are the 2 strongest people from the south?" "That I'm not sure of, but it should be the case." Radon nodded. It is a widely recognized fact that Andrella is the top secret martial art practitioner in the south. Bio lost to him in the previous tournament. But from the looks of it now, he seems to have had a breakthrough. It's apparent that he is prepared to compete for the top spot again. There's going to be a good show then, Garen said excitedly. I haven't witnessed the true strength of a real secret martial art expert. This is the perfect chance. You look quite young. I'm sure you're very talented. No wonder your master brought you here to gain experience, Radon said with a smile. But you may have gotten the wrong idea. Before they fight, we from the smaller sects would have to duel first. We have to duel first. Garen was confused for a moment, then instantly understood. That's right, if the strongest duel first, who would still want to watch us fight? It's great that you can understand that. Radon smiled and didn't say more. Garen then asked about some common knowledge in the secret martial art world. There weren't many people in the secret martial art world, but every one of them was at a strong level envied by general martial art enthusiasts. Not to mention, there was much sway and power involved behind every sect. With so many of them gathered in one place, even though it was the era of firearms, the government still had to increase the scale of security to be able to provide a timely response if and when conflict arose. Of course, martial artists couldn't fight against strong firearms. But the forces behind them, the combination of martial arts enthusiasts, their communities and their influence was still a force to be reckoned with. The police cars clearing the way was primarily to separate the martial adepts from normal people. After all, some of them were monsters unaffected by small firearms. Garen got to know more about the secret martial arts scene from Radon. The secret martial arts scene was divided into the northern and southern sects. The Celestial Circle Gate and the Crimson Sand Sword led the southern sects while the Gramden Sword sect led the north. It was unclear to them what the situation in northern side was, but the southern scene was very chaotic. Small sects came and went every decade. Even some middle-sized sects fell from power. Only the unshakable Celestial Circle Gate and the Crimson Sand Sword thrived on throughout the years. The biennial exchange held by Celestial Circle Gate was less of a communication event for all sects and more of a show of power between it and the Crimson Sand Sword. Inside the main hall, an opera show started after the clown performance, and after that was a diva battle which made all the men start howling. Two divas with hot bodies walked on the stage and started fighting. Whoever lost would strip off a piece of clothing. The blood of male audience sitting below started boiling. However, the Celestial Circle Gate had full control of the situation. The two ladies left the stage in their underwear. A band immediately followed the fight, and a couple waiters started serving the guests with an appetizing soup. People watched the show while waiting for their friends and sect members to gather. As time went by, there were more and more people inside the hall. From 10 to 20 people in the beginning to around 60 later on. After dinner, Garen and Radon followed the Celestial Circle Gate's disciples out of the hall. They crossed the corridor and a garden and arrived at their respective rooms to rest. The next morning, they were led to a practice ground for some morning exercises and flexing their bodies. Garen then returned to the main hall with the Radons, waiting for people from the White Cloud Gate to arrive. Radon's Orthogon Sword Gate already had a female disciple there. Garen was still by himself. On stage, the performance from yesterday repeated. After breakfast, Garen waited until noon. Finally he saw his fellow disciples from the White Cloud Gate come in after a few Celestial Circle Gate disciples. Senior brother, how are you here so early? Good morning, senior brother. 4 young people wearing white training uniforms came to Garen in a line and respectfully greeted him. There were 2 guys and 2 girls, their ages ranging from 15 to 20. I've been waiting for the whole morning. You guys are so slow. Garen stood up and smiled. All right, sit down and get some food. Tomorrow is the main tournament event. You all have to reach your best forms and don't lose face for us all. Yes, 4 disciples replied uniformly as they sat down around Garen. Seems like this had happened for countless sects over the course of a few days. People around them did not care for it. The 5 disciples watched some opera. The main hall was filling up as more people from other sects came in. The group was very patient. A disciple from the Celestial Circle Gate had come earlier to hand them the event schedule. Garen had already watched the show yesterday, so it was boring watching it again. The other 4 were not paying attention either, showing great anticipation for tomorrow's tournament. This is an opportunity for the disciples to show off their strength. They have also formed a tournament ranking among themselves. Radon was sitting close to Garen. The 2 sects had pulled their tables together. As time went by, they were getting closer. There's a ranking for normal disciples and one for the secret martial arts disciples. Of course the latter is the more important one, but a sect's overall strength is estimated by the overall rankings. Does the overall ranking include the masters? Garen asked in a whisper. Of course, but what's different from the disciples is that the strength of older secret martial arts masters is relatively fixed. They can't improve too much in a short period of time. Normally these masters only compete once in a few years, which is why the younger disciples are the deciding factors of the rankings. If that's the case, shouldn't every sect send out their best disciples to compete? Garen was puzzled. Naturally, but this ranking is not fully representative of a sect's strength. Some disciples have graduated from their masters, and thus, cannot come to this tournament. Which is why the major purpose of this ranking tournament is to find out who is the strongest among the young generation of disciples. Even if it's rather inaccurate in estimating a sect's overall strength, Radon explained. Garen then understood. Fei Beiyun's other 3 disciples had already graduated. Therefore, they did not meet the requirements of this tournament. Bringing Garen to this tournament was probably also intended to enrich his experience. After all, this exchange was held once every 2 years, so he could try again if he didn't make it this time. The White Cloud Gate was already one of the bottom small sects. It wasn't easy to drop even lower. After thinking this through, Garen started chatting with Radon. The middle-aged man introduced some famous sects and gates to him. Usually at Radon's own gate, nobody could bear his nagging. Now that there was someone willing to listen to his chatter, it lifted his spirits. Words shot out from his mouth non-stop. Garen sat there with him the whole day and learned many things about the secret martial arts world. The next morning, Garen led the 4 disciples from the White Cloud Gate and followed someone from the Celestial Circle Gate. They did not go back to the main hall, but rather headed toward a platform along the corridor. The platform was circular, located in an open patio on the 9th floor. 4 high-rise buildings surrounded it, blocking the scenery. The stage looked like a giant white concrete button in the middle of a dark well, strangely eye-catching. The area around it was spacious, over 20 sects all had their own sections. They circled around the platform, surrounding it. Garen sat to the left of the platform, near the entrance, with the other 4 disciples behind him. He glanced around. All he could see on the 4 sides of the platform were people's heads. Each sect had only 5 people, other than the servicing disciples from the Celestial Circle Gate. In total, there were over 100 people, all of whom looked very young. The oldest he could see were middle-aged men and women. They were around the age of Radon, less than 40 years old. The Crimson Sand Sword and the Celestial Circle Gate stood on opposite sides of the platform. Bio was in all blue, standing across a one-eyed man on the other side. Unlike Bio, the man was smiling with a mild and polite temperament. Garen carefully observed that man. He was the strongest man from the Celestial Circle Gate, Andrella. He didn't look too exceptional, far from Bio's dazzling and intrepid appearance, but Garen could tell that the man was extremely self-confident, as if he could calmly face anything in the world. Not only Garen, any disciples who were ambitious had their eyes on these two. The chaotic platform settled down thanks to the organization from the Celestial Circle Gate's disciples. A skinny elderly man with a long beard jumped onto the platform holding a big brass bell. The ranking tournament officially starts now. We will begin with the lowest ranks from last time. Which sect would like to challenge first? His voice was not loud, but everyone could hear him clearly. Garen took out a piece of paper which listed the rankings of the 27 sects. White Cloud Gate was ranked 17th. I'll go first. A man in black clothing jumped onto the platform. He ripped off his clothes and threw them off the stage. Encore Fist Sect, laugh for Draco. I challenge the Knife Fist Sect. Just then, a flat-chested woman rushed onto the stage. Nola, Knife Fist Sect. Without any more words of greeting, they started fighting. Hitting back and forth, their forms and techniques looked rigorous, but their hits were shallow and soft. The impact sounded weak. Obviously, they both lacked strength, and their martial arts were focused on technique rather than strength. No more than 10 seconds later, the man in black was pushed off the stage. The sect he came from sent another disciple up the stage, which also got pushed down quickly. There was clearly a huge skill gap. Normally, a match would not last a long time. The slightest mistake could be the deciding factor between people of a similar level. If they were close in strength, the result would depend on their current state of mind. Garen sat in the audience and watched casually. The starting matches were only show matches between disciples without secret martial arts. Match after match ended on the platform. Some disciples with conflicts also used this place to solve their problems. Soon, the White Cloud Gate was challenged by the 18th Ranked Fighting Association. The challenger was a hot blonde girl with blue eyes. She had just defeated her challengers from the 19th Ranked Sect. She had beaten 4 opponents all by herself and was still able to challenge the 17th Ranked White Cloud Gate. Let me. Behind Garen, a sturdy young man stood up excited. Senior brother, can I go? The young man was middle of the pack among the 4 disciples. His explosive fist art was not rank 1 yet, but his skin was still stronger than that of normal people. He was also very strong for his age. Simon, you think you can handle her? Without Master Fei, everything was up to Garen to decide. This was also an opportunity for him to solve problems on his own. Simon nodded. I watched her matches. Although her legs are well trained, her overall strength is weak. I just have to find an opportunity and take control of her lower body. Fine then, don't disappoint our White Cloud Gate, Garen told him. The overall ranking didn't depend on this match, but mostly on the martial adept disciples. Yet if they lost too many matches, it would still have a negative impact on the ranking. Got it, senior brother, don't worry. Simon smiled, and saluted his 3 other friends. Get lost, we all know you only wanted to fight because she's hot. A girl waved her hand speechlessly. Simon laughed as he earnestly climbed onto the platform and walked in front of the blonde girl. Bang, bang. The opponent straight up gave him 2 side kicks, hitting Simon's arm, and made a loud thud. Simon stood steadily, his face showed a complacent smile. You are too weak. The golden-haired beauty did not say anything as she got down to the floor and performed a leg sweep. Her movements were fast and precise. The part where she swept towards was extremely accurate as well, it was in the back of Simon's knees. Bang 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 bang. As the sound of a series of blows rang out, Simon's expression suddenly changed. He tried to grab a hold of his opponent's long legs but was easily avoided each time and was repeatedly kicked in the same location instead. His opponent's speed exceeded his by far too much. Even the strongest power was useless if it could not hit the opponent. As the 2 of them fought in the ring, one of them was standing still, while the other was circling around the opponent and kicking from time to time. It was as if an agile monkey was teasing a clumsy bear. The golden-haired beauty's leg sweep was abnormally fast each time. Her fighting skills showed that she had a deep foundation. Her accuracy was also very astonishing. As she circled around Simon, the places that she kicked would always be the same 5 positions. No matter how much her opponent would try to block, she would be able to repeatedly hit the same positions from different angles. Pa! Finally, Simon fell down on his knees, then could not maintain his balance any longer and fell flat onto the ground with a bang. With his opponent's foot stepping on his back, he could no longer move. The Fighting Association wins. Garen, who was spectating below, knitted his eyebrows. He was bothered by this type of opponents who specialized in speed as well. With his current increase in combat skill as well as his explosive force, he could easily take down any opponents that entered within a certain range. However, the other students were unable to do that. Simon did not even use the White Cloud combat arts. He only relied on his talents and the explosive fist arts to fight and could only be made a fool of by his opponent. It was no wonder that he lost. Simon lost, I'll go. A tall and slim woman suddenly stood up. Senior brother. She looked towards Garen. Garen glanced at her. Kelling, are you confident that you'll win? The other party are preparing to change their member as well. No, I can only give it a try. I checked their information beforehand. The Fighting Association was only inferior to us by just a little the previous time. The fact that they're proactively challenging us this time means that they're confident. Kelling was one of the most elite students picked out from White Cloud Gate and one of the 2 strongest students. She was also present in the previous exchange gathering. It's better if someone else goes. You can't lose here, otherwise it'll affect our morale. Garen hesitated for a moment, then looked towards another female student. Jiali, you'll go. All right. Jiali was not bashful at all. She stood up and somersaulted into the ring from the side. We'll let Jiali squander the opponent's stamina first, Garen whispered towards Kelling. Then his line of sight landed on the other muscular male. He was the last candidate of White Cloud Gate. Out of the 4 candidates chosen by Fei Beiyun, the main force was the 2 of them. They were chosen to improve their ranking. Jiali fought against another student of the Fighting Association in the ring. Even though her legs were sturdy, her opponent's kicking power was stronger. After a few kicks in the same spot, Jiali immediately fell down and could not get up anymore. It was just that the girl was born with a strong tenacity. When she fell over, she would get up, doing it 3 times. The people from White Cloud Gate isn't much after all. With this kind of level, you're simply too weak, the male student from the Fighting Association taunted. Before he even finished speaking, he kicked out once again and viciously struck Jiali's abdomen. Bang! Jiali staggered backwards and fell down on her buttocks. She could not get up for a while. This girl was still struggling and wanted to get up. Below, Garen immediately stood up and announced with a frown. White Cloud Gate admits defeat for this match. Ding ding ding, the Fighting Association wins, the old man loudly shouted while shaking the bell. The other female student standing behind him, Kelling, quickly went up to help Jiali get down. Are you alright? How does your knee feel? Kelling had a good relationship with her. She immediately took out an ointment and used it on Jiali. Garen was standing one side with a frown on his face. She's even weaker than the external student, senior brother Erwin. I really don't understand how she was even selected. Back then when he went for the core disciple examination, even the senior brother Erwin who was together with him was stronger than her. And if we're comparing tenacity, that girl, Darius, who joined White Cloud Gate for her family's dojo wasn't any inferior to her. Garen shook his head. Senior brother, she's the cousin of Kelling. Simon, who was resting nearby, moved closer and whispered. Garen finally nodded in realization. Who's going next? I will. Kelling stood up while coldly staring at the man standing in the ring. I will go and educate that trash who doesn't know how to speak like a human. Garen carefully sized up Kelling. She was known as the strongest female disciple within the White Cloud Dojo and was indeed somewhat skilled. From the luster of her skin, he could tell that her explosive fist arts had almost reached the rudimentary level. Looking again at her posture and movements, there was a strong hint of the 4 big forms of White Cloud combat arts. She actually assimilated the 4 big forms into her daily movements as training. Her talent was truly astonishing. Your 4 big forms is very powerful. You should be able to win. Garen nodded. Kelling was startled that her strong point was actually immediately seen through by her senior brother. She did not think much of him previously, but she was currently alarmed and did not dare to act as carefree as before. I am going. She slightly bowed towards Garen, then ran a few steps and jumped into the ring. Garen did not watch Kelling's match and looked towards the male student who remained silent. This last core student was called Rimrador. He was currently the strongest male core student in the dojo. Rimrador's elbows were slightly sharp. When his arms were folded together, it was like 2 blades were placed on his knees. He was not a new student and had been in the dojo for a few years. He was currently 20 years old. Whether it was the 4 big forms or the explosive fist arts, he had already truly mastered them. He was different from Garen. Rimrador relied purely on his willpower and perseverance to master this 2 martial arts. Just by sitting there, he gave others a feeling of a dormant volcano. Rimrador, you're up next. Are you confident? Garen was the senior brother in name. Since his master was not around, then it was his responsibility to ask this question. Rimrador nodded. The Fighting Association is not a problem. Garen could tell that other than the other secret martial art disciples, Rimrador was not afraid of other ordinary students. If it was not for his age, then he would already be qualified for learning secret martial art. On the top of the 2-story building next to the ring, several semicircular platforms extended out. On each of the platforms, the dojo masters of various dojos were seated. Fei Beiyun was among them as well. He was seated on a white wooden chair on the right and was looking at his student, Garen. Fei Beiyun, is that your last disciple that you've brought this time? A man with a red goatee was all smiles as he stared at Garen. I am not impressed at all. He's still inexperienced compared to my Shield Strike Gate's head disciple, Pharaoh. The ability of someone is not determined by words, Gate Master Chris. Fei Beiyun glanced at him. Even though Garen is still young, he can calmly and independently handle matters on his own. Regardless of his martial prowess, I am very satisfied with this. He originally thought that the 16-year-old Garen would panic when handling such matters when he was not around. He did not think that he would witness Garen methodically handle things in such a mature manner. Little did he know that Garen was actually not an ordinary 16-year-old. Adding his previous life, Garen would be in his 40s. The man with the goatee snorted and did not continue further. There was no point since he already knew that White Cloud Gate did not have any intentions of competing this time. However, an elderly man with dark skin sitting on the other side narrowed his eyes. Old man Fei, let's set aside this exchange gathering. Your eldest disciple, Rosetta, crippled my second disciple. How are we settling this matter? Fei Beiyun's expression became cold. He recognized the other party as the faction leader of the number 10 double halberd fist. He was an experienced veteran from the south. I see that it's faction leader Watson. It's just that your second disciple, Bessie, is extremely talented and was personally taught by you. How could my disciple, Rosetta, have injured him? Doesn't it seem unlikely that Rosetta was able to defeat Bessie? The great detective Fisto has already thoroughly investigated the matter. In addition to the investigation on Rosetta's movements, it has already been confirmed that it was your eldest disciple, Rosetta, that injured Bessie. All 4 of her limbs have been crippled. Hee hee, how cruel of her. Watson sinisterly laughed. No matter what, I will thoroughly investigate this incident and give Double Halberd Gate an explanation. Fei Beiyun knew about the severity of the situation. The sort of move that easily cripples others was no longer an orthodox move. There's no need for that. The elderly man sinisterly laughed once more, but he did not continue further and looked towards the ring below. Fei Beiyun became sullen. This was not the first time he received accusations. Rosetta had caused trouble a few times before, resulting in an awkward situation for the current White Cloud Gate. A few friendly dojos that used to be familiar with them were gradually drifting apart. They were almost isolated. It looks like I really need to properly investigate when I get back. Right now it's the exchange gathering between sects, I won't think about such things for the time being. His gaze landed on the ring below once more. Above a circular platform, the leaders of the Celestial Circle Gate and Crimson Sand Sword were seated together and were discussing the performances of the disciples below. The 2 sects had always been united. Even though there was fierce competition between their disciples, the relationship between the 2 sects were still friendly. The other leaders of various sects had their own social circles and were discussing their own matters. Soon, the disciple from the Fighting Association was knocked out of the ring by Kelling and was quickly caught by his fellow disciples. White Cloud Gate wins. The Fighting Association has failed their challenge, the old man loudly shouted while shaking the bell. Kelling did not move from the ring and loudly said, White Cloud Gate wishes to challenge number 16 White Shark Gate. The White Shark Gate was a very strong sect. A female disciple with fair skin and tall figure casually came up and traded a few blows with Kelling. Both of them did not want to expend their energies further and simply came to a draw. It was obvious that they were conserving their energy for the disciple ranking tournament later. These matches were just an appetizer. The true show was the ranking tournament later. It also included the true ranking competition that even disciples of secret martial arts had to participate. It was also the focus of the various sects. After Kelling returned, Rimrador did not wish to participate. His objective was the ranking tournament later as well. Garen simply stood up and announced that White Cloud Gate gave up on continuing their challenge. The matches at the beginning was originally intended for ordinary disciples to demonstrate their skills. The real focus was on the ranking tournament later. Each sect would send out 5 pupils and each of their rankings would be aggregated to determine the real ranking of each sect. It was also the stage to find the strongest among the younger generation. After that, it was just more matches between ordinary disciples of a few sects. There was basically nothing to see, it was only contests between those using basic skills at the most. Without any secret martial arts, they were only slightly better than general hobbyists. Finally, the match between ordinary disciples of Celestial Circle Gate and Crimson Sand Sword ended. The elderly judge raised up the bell in his hand and was no longer listless like before. Next, we'll begin the official ranking tournament. Each sect will send out disciples to participate as individuals and the overall ranking of each sect will be determined by a fixed formula. The old man waved his hand and a few beautiful young ladies appeared. They were wearing short skirts and stockings, while their hair were tied into ponytails. One of the young ladies was carrying a large box as she stood next to the old man. Could each sect please send out their representatives to draw lots? Then head toward your respective rings for your qualifying matches. The old man pointed toward the surrounding buildings. The rest of the matches will take place within the surrounding buildings. The previous top 3 sects will automatically enter the finals and need not participate in the drawing. Andrella from Celestial Circle Gate smiled toward Bio from a distance, then turned around and walked into the building behind him. He could not be bothered to continue watching the lot drawing. Bio snorted and, not wanting to be outdone, left as well. The two of them were far stronger than the other disciples. There was no need for them to worry that a new opponent would suddenly appear. They only had each other as opponents from the start. Garen was queuing up within the crowd as he watched the both of them leaving. He could feel the powerful confidence and pride from the two of them. He did not understand how strong they were, but he knew that the average person would not be able to ignore all of the secret martial art practitioners there and calmly leave. It was a sign of confidence from having great power and success. He could not help but recall the words of his senior sister, Rosetta. Every single victory will nourish your confidence and make you more powerful. Soon, the people in front of him had drawn their lots and it was his turn. Garen walked to the front, then nonchalantly reached into the box and pulled out a lot. The number written on the white paper was 24. He stood on one side as the rest of the disciples from White Cloud Gate drew their lots as well. Could the participants who have drawn their lots please proceed to their respective rings? The winner of each match will proceed to the next ring according to the referee's instructions. Participants that have lost will all return to this ring to participate in another round of ranking. Everyone will be given a chance to challenge any other participant, other than the winner, for their rank. Once the matches has ended, the top 10 will proceed with the finals, the old man loudly announced. Garen and the rest of the disciples from White Cloud Gate went on separate ways and headed for their respective rings. Garen's lot number was 24. After entering a large building, an attendant escorted him through a series of corridors to a spacious workout room. The room was white and was the size of a large conference hall. There was a white, circular ring in the middle and there was ropes surrounding it just like a boxing ring. A young female referee in black clothing was already waiting in it. There were also some other young people standing in the room, who were there to watch the fight. There was also a bald and muscular man, who was so muscular that his muscles was slightly deformed, standing next to the ring. He was staring at Garen the moment he entered. This man was wearing a black leather pants while his upper body was naked. His muscles seemed to throb along with his breathing and the muscles on his shoulders looked like malformed roots growing out of the ground. Could the contestants please come to the stage, the female referee on the stage loudly said. Garen stopped appraising his opponent. He slowly walked to the side of ring and somersaulted into the ring. Even though he was muscular as well, there was still quite a difference between him and his opponent. It was like the difference between an adult and a child. His opponent also got into the ring. One of them was big and the other was small. On one side, his skin was dark and he was wearing a black leather pants. On the other side, Garen's clothing was entirely white and his skin was fair. As the two of them stood on the stage, the contrast between them was clear. At that moment, a pair of man and woman entered the room as well. They were the two that went to receive Garen and his master, Jaden, and that cross-dressing girl who tried to sound out Garen but ended up crying. Junior sister, this is the ring of that Garen from White Cloud Gate. This is his first match, Jaden whispered to the girl while his gaze naturally landed on Garen. This guy is pretty lucky, his opponent looks strong. The girl gloatingly whispered while giggling, he deserves it for being so arrogant at the station. This time he's definitely going to suffer. Jaden nodded. His opponent is Benjamin, the third Holy Fist disciple from Holy Fist Gate, and has been practicing secret martial arts for 3 years. Even though Holy Fist Gate's rank is only 20th and isn't strong, the strength of its third strongest disciple definitely isn't ordinary. If I were to meet this Benjamin, I can only admit defeat as well. I heard that this Garen was only accepted as a secret martial art disciple a while back. The difference between them is very clear. In addition, Jaden added, that Garen's defense isn't bad. He's definitely going to be beaten up for a long time. After finishing, he could not help but laughed as well. He's going to suffer this time. Within the ring, Garen moved his head from side to side while calmly analyzing his opponent. His opponent's size was indeed giving him a lot of pressure. This type of body size was already similar to his second senior brother, Farak, and the power is definitely very scary. When Jaden and that girl entered the room, he saw them from the corner of his eye. It was obvious that they were there to watch the show. To meet me in the first match, you're unlucky. The muscular man grinned, revealing a set of pearly white teeth. My name's Benjamin, the third Holy Fist disciple from Holy Fist Gate. You should feel honored for losing to my fist. Garen was dumbfounded. His opponent was so egoistic that he was proclaiming his victory before they even fought. I am Garen, disciple of the 17th ranked White Cloud Gate. Can we start? He looked toward the referee. Ding. The female referee nodded and shook the silver bell in her hands. You may begin. She quickly got off the stage, so that she would not be accidentally injured. Garen narrowed his eyes and analyzed this Benjamin. This was the first time he fought with a disciple from the true secret martial arts world. He had Mammoth's secret technique, but his opponent had their own secret martial art as well. Obtaining victory depended on the difference between their experience and strength. I'll test his strength first. With his mind set, Garen slowly took a standard White Cloud combat arts stance. Go ahead. Your stance isn't bad, but let's see how your strength is. Rank 17th, don't disappoint me. Benjamin laughed and walked toward Garen with a boxing stance. Kai. His right fist extended and instantly disappeared into the distance. It turned into a black line as it smashed toward Garen's chin. It was a simple uppercut, but the speed was fast and the strength was strong. Before it even reached, Garen felt a slight blast of wind pressing on the skin of his chin. What a powerful strength! Garen quickly reacted and his stance immediately changed. His right elbow swung forward and accurately arrived in front of the fist. Bang! As their fist and elbow collided, both of them took a step back. Garen narrowed his eyes as he looked at his opponent. He's very strong, his strength should be close to 2. If this was his normal strength, in addition with the force of impact and speed, he should be able to hit as hard as me. He's indeed strong. However, I am stronger. His current strength attribute was at 2.45. Even though his body size did not stand out, the muscle density of his body was extremely high. He might not be eye-catching, but his actual explosive force was far stronger than most people. Kill him, Benjamin, kill him, the girl beside Jaden suddenly loudly shouted. Raising up her fist like a little girl, she continuously waved. That fellow from White Cloud Gate said you're a big piece of shit. He even said that he can beat you using only one hand. What a dumb way to goad someone, even an idiot wouldn't fall for it. Garen was speechless. He looked toward his opponent. He was even more speechless when he looked toward his opponent. Benjamin's forehead was bursting with blue veins and his eyes were bright red. It was evident that he was really angry. You brat, he heavily panted. Tyrant star. He suddenly roared. Both of his fists started to darken, turning from a normal suntan color to a pitch black ink color. I am going to smash you to death. Benjamin charged toward Garen like a mad rhinoceros while panting heavily. The stage was trembling under his heavy footsteps, generating a series of disintegrating sounds. A straight punch. Benjamin's fist was like a blackened piece of metal as it rushed toward Garen's chest. It was like a heavy, gigantic hammer was fiercely swung at Garen. Shwoot, charge, step. Garen suddenly shouted. He lifted his elbow and knocked aside the punch, then his body moved forward and charged into his opponent's chest. Benjamin's face went pale as his body flew backwards from the impact. Garen chuckled as his right leg rose up and stamped forward. Boom. Benjamin was knocked down from the air and heavily landed on the ring, causing it to shake violently. He lay there with froth coming out from his mouth and had already fainted. With 3 simultaneous moves, Garen was able to knock down Benjamin, who had already been sent flying, into the mat of the ring. With his White Cloud combat art having reached intermediate level, he was already considered a seasoned veteran. Dealing with someone who had not gone through brutal combat was simply too easy for him. The intermediate level of White Cloud combat art allowed Garen to swiftly switch between his 4 big forms. He was also adept at baiting his opponents with deliberate flaws in his stance and exploiting that moment to strike. On the other hand, Benjamin's combat level was still at the beginner level. The difference between them was too large. The fight was already over before Garen even used half of his strength. His opponent's secret martial art did not have any effects at all. The entire hall was silent. The referee, who was standing at the side of the ring, did not expect the fight to end so quickly as well. She was stunned for a moment before she quickly went into the ring and shook her bell. Winner, Garen from White Cloud Gate. The next match will take place at ring number 17. That was when the spectators finally reacted. With the referee's announcement, a huge uproar occurred. A few members of the Holy Fist Gate quickly went into the ring to check on Benjamin. They breathed a sigh of relief when they discovered that he had only fainted. Jaden and that girl were dumbstruck as well. What a high combat level. Jaden muttered, out of all of the disciples that I've seen, his combat level is enough to rank within the top 10. That girl who previously goaded Benjamin was dejected at the moment. Even with her level, she could tell that she was not his match. Garen got out of the ring and headed toward the entrance while tidying his clothes. Seeing that Garen was heading toward their position, the two of them quickly got out of the way. As Garen was walking past the two of them, he glanced toward the girl. He slowly reached out his hand and stopped in front of her neck, then suddenly clenched his fist. Kacha. He mimicked the sound of bone breaking with his mouth. The girl shivered and her face went pale. She was like a pitiful little lamb. Little fellow, you're still too inexperienced. Garen laughed as he left. He followed the attendant standing outside to ring number 17. Her senior brother, Jaden, was also held down just now by the aura that Garen deliberately emitted. He felt that he would be instantly crushed if he tried to move. He could only watch as his junior sister was being bullied and did not dare to move. He was only able to relax when Garen left. Junior sister, are you alright? He could tell that Garen did not have any ill intentions against his junior sister. That was just a small punishment for her previous actions. Wah! The girl started to wail out loud as tears flowed out of her eyes. After exiting the tournament grounds, Garen walked along the black corridor and rushed towards the tournament venues of White Cloud Gate trainees. A medical team in white suits in the corridor rushed into the tournament grounds. They put Benjamin, who was in the ring, onto a stretcher, then quickly passed by Garen. Garen looked at Benjamin on the stretcher. I won the first round, he mumbled. Walking along the corridor through several corners and break rooms, Garen soon reached a small room with a sparse crowd. He gently opened the door. The interior had the exact layout as the tournament grounds earlier. In the ring, Colin was leaning on the pillars panting. Her whole body felt weak, and there were blood stains all over her face and body. Her opponent was a slender young man with a cool air about him. He didn't have on him any trace of having been in a fight. From the looks of it, Colin could still hang on for a little longer. Even though she was at a disadvantage, but the outcome couldn't yet be determined anytime soon. Garen didn't stay, he just casually looked at Colin, and let her see him, then decisively turned around and walked towards the other tournament grounds. After that, he visited the tournament venues of the rest of the trainees. Simon had won easily. He was up against an average opponent whose secret martial art was relying on a burst of pace, but that had been completely inundated by him. Carrie and her opponent were difficult to set apart. And lastly, Rimrador. Garen walked into the tournament venue. In the ring, Rimrador silently stood his ground, and managed to strike his opponent to the ground with one punch. He had a blank look on his face, and there was a strange air about him. His opponent was a young boy with a short stature. The youth was wounded all over his body. He must have been struck to the ground multiple times, but this time he still managed to slowly get up, albeit with some difficulty. You want more, Rimrador said casually. He was wearing a pair of black cuffs. Both his elbows were bent so it made his arms seem like two sharp gimlets. If we go on like this, you'll die. Bang. He adopted a lightning-quick shot form and viciously struck the youth's chest. The blow caused the youth to rebound off the ring ropes. I admit defeat. The youth struggled to spout those few words out. His head slumped, and he fainted. No fun, Rimrador said indifferently. He waited for the referee to announce his victory, then somersaulted down from the ring and walked to Garen. Eldest senior brother, why are you here? Garen frowned slightly. He sensed an inexplicable temperament on Rimrador, similar to eldest senior sister. Your combat skills, were they taught by eldest senior sister? Yeah, Rimrador casually nodded. Garen was slightly worried, but he wasn't sure why. He patted Rimrador's shoulder and didn't continue the subject. Time to go to the next tournament. Rimrador nodded, and followed Garen out, leaving the slightly deserted tournament ground. Both of them came out from the door and went their separate ways. Garen found his next tournament venue based on the room number, 17. As he reached the corridor of the room, he saw that the entrance was already crowded. Most of them were students wearing tight yellow clothes. Garen wasn't sure which sect they belonged to. Garen furrowed his brow a little, and slowly walked forward. Clap. The first brawn he touched felt his whole body shudder all of a sudden, and automatically avoided him and gave up his place. Then the second one, and the third. A series of people, those that Garen touched, all voluntarily parted to let Garen pass. Even they were confused as to why they were giving way to Garen. Garen slowly walked into the room through the middle of the crowd, as if it was parted seawater revealing a narrow aisle. It made him unusually conspicuous. Inside the room, Jaden and the crybaby girl from Celestial Circle Gate were already there. When he saw how everyone politely gave way to Garen, Jaden was impressed. See that, Long-er. That's the vibration that can only be mastered by a true expert. This guy, so powerful. Jaden was in awe. Vibration. The girl still had tear stains on her face. She stared at Garen menacingly, and was shocked to hear what her senior brother had said. He can master vibration. Senior brother, do you not see it? Vibration is a threshold only mastered by the top 10 level of experts. Stop talking. By mastering vibration, he is already qualified enough to become a contender for top 10. Just watch this tournament, Jaden whispered as he dragged Long-er to an inconspicuous corner. He was worried Garen might make Long-er cry again. Garen walked in through the crowd. His strong and tall body was extremely proportionate, his stride calm, his face didn't show the slightest trace of anxiety of someone about to compete in a tournament. You kid, how dare you shove me? A brawny man with stubble clad in black roared and shoved Garen. Clap. His hands were on Garen, but he didn't manage to move him. He was stunned. Clap clap. He shoved hard again, twice, but there was no reaction. It was like pushing against a high wall, it was impossible to move. The weak can only rely on such means to win, huh? Garen looked down at the stubbled man in front of him, and casually waved a hand. Bang. The brawn crashed onto the side wall like a swatted fly, his eyes rolled and he blacked out. Whoa. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone avoided him like the plague, no one dared to stand too close to Garen. So powerful. Margant was dealt with just like that. This guy is from White Cloud Gate, right? Who would have thought there was someone so strong in the southern 12 gates? Garen didn't bother looking at the others. He threw away a fine needle. It was the secret weapon that the stubbled man tried to use on Garen, of which he had managed to neutralize. He walked straight to the ring and asked a stunned Celestial Circle Gate referee disciple. Where's my opponent? Still not here yet. You just settled him. Under Garen's piercing stare, the referee broke out in a cold sweat. Garen was shocked. He looked at the stubbled man passed out by the wall, and shook his head slightly. Where is the next round? You don't have to move for the next round, your opponent will come over, the referee hurriedly explained. Your winning time was the shortest. The future tournament venues will be determined by winning times, the shorter time would gain the home advantage. Garen nodded, closed his eyes, and sat down cross-legged to rest. As he quieted, the whole room slipped into a murmur of discussion. The 20 over people in the room didn't dare to speak loudly, for fear of accidentally disturbing Garen. Everyone was whispering to their companions, and would look in awe at Garen, sitting by the side of the ring, from time to time. Jaden and the young Long-er were infected by the atmosphere too, they lowered their voices. An expert who has mastered vibration. I can't believe that White Cloud Gate, one of the southern 12 gates, would produce such an expert. I thought this time would be the same as before, and the southern 12 gates union would just be eliminated. I didn't expect that there would be someone like Garen. Long-er hid behind her senior brother, as if she was worried she would be spotted by Garen. So senior brother, is this Garen the strongest person in the southern 12 gates union? Maybe, if we don't consider the disciples trained by masters, then he should be the strongest one. The Southern 12 Gates was originally an alliance of multiple small sects forming a strong force to counter other bigger sects and increase its influence as an organization. Most of the sects within it were of a similar level, but now with the sudden appearance of this Garen, there might be issues with the balance amongst the sects. But this isn't something for us to consider, Jaden patiently analyzed. I've seen the strongest disciple from the remaining 11 sects, not comparable to Garen at all. This Garen could indeed be the strongest man within the Southern 12 Gates. The strongest man within the Southern 12 Gates, huh? Garen's figure sitting cross-legged reflected in Long Ur's clear pink pupils for the first time. Upon defeating the stubbled Margant with one blow, Garen's fame was spread by the students who had witnessed it. Margant was the elite fighter from Myriad Manifestations Gate. He broke into the final 15 the last time around, and was the strongest core from the Southern 12 Gates. Now he had been sent flying against a wall in one blow by Garen, and had passed out. This instantly caused a stir amongst the spectators in all tournament venues. In that instant, all the disciples from Southern 12 Gates who had felt ashamed for always ranking low in the tournaments could hold their heads up high. They had always swallowed their pride in front of stronger sects, and held their tongues when they met with trouble. They were always the side to suffer. All because they didn't have strong senior brothers and sisters to back them up, and it would be impossible for masters to intervene in disciple-level conflicts. After all, others would have stronger masters. Natural selection was accepted as an inalienable principle, so the disciples from the entire Southern 12 Gates were used to such oppression. Now that Garen had outshone everyone, this gave all the disciples of Southern 12 Gates hope. If he could defeat a top 15 contender with such ease, they could have a good chance at top 10 this time. Senior brother Garen from White Cloud Gate is the strongest man from our Southern 12 Gates. I heard he easily defeated Benjamin from Holy Fist Gate. What about the rest of the disciples from Southern 12 Gates? All eliminated. It's all up to senior brother Garen now. Within the tournament room, more and more disciples from Southern 12 Gates crowded in. The tournament venue was packed, there were people everywhere. The voices of the students were rowdy. These disciples who had been subdued for too long finally saw hope. They all crowded over to watch Garen compete. Garen slowly opened his eyes, and looked at a disciple not far off in front of him. You said everyone else from White Cloud Gate has been eliminated. That disciple nervously nodded. Yes, senior brother. 70 to 80 people have already been eliminated. No one from White Cloud Gate managed to enter the third round except you. So that means, I'm the only one left. Garen wasn't surprised. He looked over to the entrance. Colin, Simon and a few others were shielding Carrie as they squeezed in. At that moment, a stout youth with fat all over his body climbed into the ring. He was wearing a white tank top, tight against his thick layers of fat, like a large stuffed balloon. The portly youth seemed to still be chewing something, and swallowed it with a gulp. His eyes stared straight at Garen outside the ring. A contestant from Southern 12 Gates. How lucky. Garen stood up, somersaulted onto the ring and stood his ground. The referee rang the bell. Let the tournament begin. I am Luo of Asura Palm. And you are. The portly youth had a head of blonde hair. It didn't look dyed, but instead natural. He reached a hand to brush his blonde hair off his face, and asked earnestly. Garen, White Cloud Gate. Garen raised his hand, put on a 4 major forms pose, and he instantly sharpened up. I'll just stand still and let you hit me, how's that? The stout youth Luo said, chuckling. As long as you manage to injure me, you win. You idiot. Jaden outside the ring covered his eyes as he couldn't bear to look. Bang. Garen leapt forward, his elbow straight like a sharp arrow, piercing straight into the fats of the chest and abdomen of the stout youth. The layers of white fat started to violently vibrate, fatty ripples formed in the parts that were hit. Luo's expression changed, his face was pale. Go. Garen's expression was composed, he gathered momentum with a twist of his foot, and thrust his entire body against the stout youth. Wham! The force caused the hill-like body of the stout youth to fly out of the ring and crash onto the ground, creating a huge cloud of dust as he landed. Declare it, Garen said casually as he straightened up. Quote. Yes, very well. The referee snapped out of his shock. The winner of this round, Garen from White Cloud Gate. He rang the bell hard, but the sound produced by the small bell was too soft, it was completely muted by the gasps from the crowd. Jaden stood in a corner with a somber expression. Looks like we underestimated his strength. He is already qualified to challenge Bio of Crimson Sand Sword. Asura Palm is ranked 7th. This stout one was one of their best. He was ranked 11th in the previous meet. The fat all over his body was his best defense. His secret martial art is the constantly activated tough ripples of fat to counteract vibration. Vibration by average experts have almost no effect on him. To a side, Long Er's petite face turned pale. So how did he take down the stout guy in such a short amount of time? His strength, speed, and his technique of consecutively concentrating power onto one point, he combined all these to directly break the surface tension and counter the ripples of Fat's secret martial art. What a terrifying fighting spirit! Jaden explained with a mumble. His vibration, his physical coordination, and most importantly the speed of his explosive force, is so much more powerful than average practitioners of secret martial arts. I once saw the secret martial art of White Cloud Gate, the mammoth secret technique. Its general effects could not achieve the toughness that he had displayed. Is it possible that he is training in a new martial art technique? Something that's not from White Cloud Gate? No, he did actually use the explosive force technique from White Cloud Gate. A male voice could suddenly be heard beside them. Jaden and Long Er were both startled. They turned around, and both instantly displayed reverence. Eldest senior brother. Greetings, eldest senior brother. Both of them quickly greeted him. Standing to one side, was the one-eyed Andrella, who had just rushed over to watch the tournament. He was the strongest disciple of their generation from Celestial Circle Gate, and the most prominent youth martial arts expert in the South. He had a black eye patch over his left eye, and a crystal clear, dark golden pupil for his left eye. A head of long, jet black hair was casually draped behind him to the waist. This gave him a mysterious and gentle impression. 19, 23, you're still fresh. With only a few years of training under your belt, it's natural that you can't recognize his true style. Andrella looked at Garen in the ring with a trace of admiration. If I'm not wrong, this Garen has mastered the highest level of secret martial art of White Cloud Gate. How terrifyingly talented! Mammoth's secret technique of White Cloud Gate is merely a third-rate secret martial art. Many sects have a similar training method for secret martial arts. I can't believe he could actually train in a third-rate secret martial art to such an extent. It can't be, eldest senior brother, you mean to say that the secret martial art level of this Garen is higher than that of his master? Jaden asked, aghast. I'm not sure. The true strength of the White Cloud Gate master is known only to the masters who have dueled with him. But it's just a third-rate secret martial art, so even if he's highly trained in it, the power would be limited. Not to worry. Andrella looked at Garen, who was resting cross-legged, and shook his head regrettably. What a shame. If he was discovered by Celestial Circle Gate first, his accomplishments would be unimaginable. Shame. His secret martial art is limited. He has peaked. He used the word shame twice. Jaden and Long Er understood what he meant. Garen had trained in the secret martial art of White Cloud Gate to such an extent that his physicality had crystallized. It was impossible for him to change course and train in another secret martial art. Moreover, the limit of a third-rate secret martial art was the level on which Garen was at. There was no way to enhance it any further. So eldest senior brother, in your opinion, what ranking does this Garen deserve based on his true strength? Long Er asked curiously. With the strongest eldest senior brother by her side, the trauma that Garen caused her seemed to completely vanish. She was instantly more relaxed. It should be the same as Eastern Saintcloth from Quicksand, around 5th or 6th, provided that the true strength of the rest hasn't changed much this year, Andrella replied casually. 5th or 6th? Jaden and Long Er were both shocked. They couldn't believe it. Garen did not notice Andrella in the corner of the crowd. It was as if he had an unusual magic. The people around him barely gave him a second look, as if he was utterly invisible. Garen was breathing slowly according to the breathing rhythm of the secret martial art to recover his energy. Even though he defeated the stout contender from Asura Palm in one blow, he still expended some energy. He still had to prepare himself to face the next opponent in his prime condition. Unfortunately, after waiting for quite some time, his opponent for the next round didn't turn up. It wasn't just him, even the referee started to get impatient. He sent a disciple from Celestial Circle Gate to inquire, and found out that Garen's opponent for the next round was still in the middle of a tough fight. Apart from ongoing duels, some contestants had sustained severe injuries and required rest and treatment. All contestants for the fourth round had to continue waiting. The rest were martial arts experts who had already progressed to the fifth round. According to the rules, it was impossible to arrange a duel with them in that moment. That means I can have a little time to rest for now. Garen stood up and asked softly. Yes, you have about half an hour to rest. In the meantime, you are free to move about, the referee nodded and politely replied. In the secret martial art world, the strong was always revered. Garen's true strength had gained his respect. Very well, Garen planned to sit cross-legged again and continue his recovery. After sitting only for a while, a disciple from Celestial Circle Gate clad in black handed a note to him. Senior brother Garen, someone outside claims to be an acquaintance of yours. He asked me to give this to you. An acquaintance. Garen took the note, opened it, and his eyes widened instantly. There was only one line written on the note. Want to know how Gregor died? Meet me at 2 o'clock at night. I'll be waiting for you outside. There was even an illustration of a familiar tattoo design below the words. It was the graphic on the back of the hands of those psychokinetics. He crumpled the note in shock. Garen's eyes narrowed, there was a trace of coldness in them. Where is the person who passed you the note? He asked the disciple who handed the note over. Still waiting outside. Before he could finish his words, he saw Garen jump straight off the ring and dash out the door. The packed crowd around the ring did not impede him at all. He was like a moving reef, the crowd automatically parted wherever he went. He was out of the room in an instant. There seemed to be a commotion in the room on the other side, it sounded like a crowd cheering. Shira, 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 the cheers were like the tide, coming wave after wave, the atmosphere was bustling. Garen glanced around the corridor. Suddenly the corner of a black cloak at the far end of the corridor caught his eye. He arched his body and instantly rushed towards it. He was at the end of the corridor in a few strides. Around the corner was a 10-odd meters straight black corridor. There were no bends in the middle, but the person earlier had vanished, all in a matter of a few seconds. Traveling 20 to 30 meters in a few seconds. Garen looked at the people walking around in the corridor. He grabbed a female disciple that walked past him and asked, "Did you see someone in a black cloak pass by earlier?" Ouch. That hurts. No, I didn't, the girl repeatedly answered in shock. I'm sorry, I've hurt you. It was only then that Garen noticed he was using too much force, so he released his grip on her. You really didn't see? I really didn't. Who wears a black cloak in broad daylight anyway? She rubbed her shoulder as she finished replying, then ran off as fast as a rabbit. Garen walked on along the corridor. He kept questioning passers-by as he walked, but the answer was that no one had even seen a person in a black cloak. The other disciples from White Cloud Gate rushed over too, and followed behind Garen. Colin wanted to walk up and greet him, but was halted by Simon, who shook his head at her. It must be something important to eldest senior brother. Let's help him search. Apart from Rimrador, who was nowhere to be seen, the four of them kept asking everyone they met, but no one had seen a person in a black cloak at all. Garen walked into a break room along the corridor. He slowly sat on the bench and wiped the sweat and oil off his face. The note in that corner of a black cloak were haunting him. Shouts and cheers kept coming intermittently from the rooms around them. Those were the tournament venues of other contestants. The other three from White Cloud Gate were also exhausted, so they sat down with Garen. Eldest senior brother, Colin looked at Garen worriedly. It's almost time for the next tournament, right? Garen looked up, and reverted to his usual calm. Thanks for helping me out in the manhunt. Let's get back to the tournament. Okay, Simon and the rest answered hurriedly. Garen stood up and sorted through his emotions. Ever since he enhanced his mammoth secret technique to the level of achieved mammoth, even though he didn't feel anything then, eventually he realized that the achieved level of the mammoth secret technique made his every action more coherent. The four major forms of White Cloud combat techniques, vibration technique in strength utilization under the mammoth secret technique, and techniques in fundamental wrestling arts had all harmonized into one. It was as if he was a real mammoth. His every move was calm but powerful, and integrated. He finally understood the purpose of the mammoth secret technique. It was coordination. Coordinated practitioners of the White Cloud secret method, explosive fist arts, White Cloud combat arts and the like, would be able to meld all the techniques into one, and form a naturally coherent comprehensive force.